In 2021, a foreign company bought land near an Air Force base in Grand Fork, North Dakota. It seemed like a harmless transaction. In fact, over 25 million acres of U.S. farmland is owned by foreign nationals. But when politicians in Washington, D.C. learned the new buyer was from China, both Republicans and Democrats collectively lost their mind. U.S. lawmakers feared that China could use this 300-acre plot of land to gain control over the U.S. food supply chain, or even worse, gain inside information into the United States military. Gary Bridgeford was the American farmer who sold the land and received $2.6 million for the transaction. He since has received threats from his neighbors, with many people in the community upset that he would sell his farmland to a Chinese company. Gary's response? People hear the China stuff and there's concern. But everyone has a phone in their pocket that was probably made in China. Where do you draw the line? That's exactly the problem here. Because the local mayor who approved the transaction said the Chinese investors were planning to build a $700 million corn processing facility on the land. This investment would create 200 new American jobs for this small American town. Is the United States government overreacting to Chinese nationals buying U.S. farmland? Or is this really a national security threat? If you ask some Republicans, they want you to believe this is the most dangerous threat to America.
China is also our #1 biggest national security threat. All you have to do is look at the infiltration they're doing in our country.
Chinese companies own nearly $2 billion worth of U.S. farmland, according to the USDA, and their ownership of land has increased dramatically over the past decade.
And the more they buy up our land, they're trying to disguise it as investments. What really is happening, though, is they're buying it around strategic areas.
We need to deal with China as the threat that they are. The way I would deal with it is, #1, we wouldn't allow them to buy U.S. soil. We would take the land that they've bought back from them.
This is Nikki Haley. She's the former governor of South Carolina and a Republican candidate for the 2024 presidential election. She believes in a lot of the core values most far-right extremists do, which is that China is the root of all of our problems in the United States. According to the Republican Party, the Chinese government is strategically buying farmland to gain access to U.S. military secrets and potentially using this information against the U.S. in a future military conflict. As we move closer to the 2024 presidential election, we are going to witness the anti-China sentiment increase inside America for one simple reason. Fear is one of the most powerful human emotions, and these politicians will use any technique they can to win more votes. Never forget that being hawkish towards China is the one thing that unites Republicans and Democrats right now. But when we look at the data and the facts surrounding the ownership of U.S. farmland, what is really going on? How much farmland does China really own inside the United States? Who is actually buying this farmland? Is it Chinese investors, businessmen, or is it the Chinese Communist Party itself? And what about the flip side of the equation? If Chinese citizens can purchase U.S. farmland, how much Chinese farmland do American citizens own? In today's video, I'm going to reveal the truth about everything related to U.S. farmland and what the Chinese are actually doing inside America. But first, I want to give a huge thank you to the sponsor of today's video, which is AG1. And actually, it's the best sponsor I could have for this video, and here's why. As you'll see in today's presentation, food supply chains are the most important thing for every country to secure. And I've been securing my own supply chain of health by taking AG1 every morning. AG1 is an all-in-one foundational nutritional drink packed with 75 vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods that has now become a foundation in my morning routine. All I need to do is take 1 scoop once a day, every day, and I'm good to go. Simply mix it in 8 ounces of water, and that's it. 1 scoop a day supports metabolism, energy levels, while also promoting healthy aging and gut health. And best of all, the taste is absolutely fantastic. I couldn't be happier to have such an amazing sponsor like AG1, and today I have a special offer for you. Simply go to drinkag1.com/CyrusJansen to receive a bonus 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D3 and K2 plus 5 travel packs free with your first purchase. You can't put a price tag on your own health? Click the link in my description to get started. So let's establish a baseline here. In the United States, there is over 900 million acres of farmland. Not surprisingly, 97% of it is owned by US citizens. Farmland is a lucrative investment for the rich. This is why Bill Gates made headlines a few years back when he became one of America's largest private landowners. Of the remaining 3% of foreign-owned farms, China owns 384,000 acres, or approximately 0.014% of US farmland. It's an amazing statistic because it's probably much lower than you thought. And again, if you listen to Republicans like Nikki Haley, you would probably think the Chinese are buying huge portions of American farmland. In reality, here is a graph from the US Department of Agriculture that clearly shows China is ranked 18th out of 111 total countries that own farmland in the United States. Who would have thought that the Netherlands, one of the smallest countries in Europe, would own 12 times the amount of farmland than China does? I mean, even Luxembourg, which is one of the smallest countries in Europe, owns more US farmland than China. Not surprisingly, the foreign country that owns the most amount of farmland in the US is our neighbor, Canada. Here is a map showcasing the 13 million acres of farmland Canadians own. And this is a map showcasing the mere 384,000 acres that are Chinese owned. And here are where things get very interesting. Chinese owned farmland is highly concentrated. In fact, 80% of Chinese farmland is in one of two locations, North Carolina and Texas. Let's break down each location and reveal the facts behind the Chinese ownership, because it's nothing like what our media is telling you. Let's start with North Carolina, where the world's largest pork producer, Smithfield Farms, is located. This farm has a history that goes back all the way to 1936. But 10 years ago, the US government approved the sale of the farm and its 146,000 acres to one of China's largest meat producers, the WH Group. The deal was worth over $7 billion. And after the US government approval, it made the WH Group one of the largest overseas owners of American farmland. So what has China been doing with America's premier pig farm? Something rather boring, actually. They've been exporting pork back to mainland China to meet the high demand of pork. It's honestly that simple. Pork is the most consumed meat in China, and the average Chinese person eats twice the amount of pork as their American counterpart. Okay, so the Smithfield farm isn't a national security risk. But what about Texas? This is a more interesting case study because about 40% of all Chinese-owned land in the United States can be linked to one single person, Chinese billionaire Sun Guanxing. Sun has a fortune of nearly $3 billion and made his money in the energy sector in China's Xinjiang region. In 2016, he purchased over 100,000 acres from a Texas farmer to build a wind farm, the exact same business that made him a success in China. But in 2021, Texas Governor Greg Abbott signed a bill to block the Chinese billionaire from tapping into the Texas power grid. Sun still owns the land to this day and still collects royalties by leasing the land out back to American farmers. Is Sun a national security threat to the US, or is he just a savvy businessman that capitalized on an American opportunity? In doing my research for this video, I came across a fascinating article published by the Union of Concerned Scientists that reveals the truth. Farmland consolidation, not Chinese ownership, is the real national security threat. This article makes the case that our US politicians are simply overreacting to Chinese ownership and missing the real problem that exists in American farms. Small and mid-sized farms are rapidly disappearing in America as they are being bought out by larger corporate-run farms across the country. Farmland consolidation means that a few corporate entities have control over a majority of what grows, giving them considerable power over our food security. They can dictate food prices and drive them higher, as we've witnessed with the meat and poultry prices over the last several years, and most recently with the egg price crisis. So farmland consolidation is bad for farmers, bad for food sovereignty, bad for food security, and indeed bad for our national security. This is the story that needs to be published, but of course it won't get any traction because blaming China is the easier option for our American politicians. In fact, just listen to this quote from US Senator John Tester. "Any company and any individual living in China that comes and tries to buy land can be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party because they have that kind of control over their people. In this particular case, guilty until proven innocent." Let's put it that way. There are two alarming things about this statement from the US Senator. The first is that he assumes all Chinese citizens are controlled by the Chinese government. This thought is both wrong and dangerous. It's wrong because most Chinese citizens don't work for, nor do they have any connections to the Chinese government. They are simply ordinary citizens of China. The reason this comment is dangerous is because the US Senator is abandoning one of the key principles of law that exist inside of America. Everyone who is living and working inside this country, regardless of their race, is always innocent until proven guilty. By implying that we should treat Chinese citizens differently and look at them as guilty until proven innocent is a completely un-American principle. In fact, he is running the risk of feeding into the broader anti-Asian sentiment and xenophobia. We actually saw this earlier this year when a Texas senator proposed a bill that would forbid Chinese nationals from buying real estate. It's hard to imagine we could have a US politician propose a bill to block foreign nationals from buying real estate inside America, because it goes against the very principle of what this nation stands for. We depend on immigration to drive our economy and our population growth. I'll say this one more time. It's completely un-American to promote such ideas. Skeptics will argue that it's not fair. Why aren't US citizens allowed to purchase Chinese farmland? The answer to this question is actually quite simple. The United States has always been and will always be an immigrant nation. We've only become the superpower we are today because of robust immigration. China has a different system. Foreigners can purchase real estate. For example, I purchased an apartment in Shanghai in 2009 and flipped it for a handsome profit 6 years later. As a foreign national, I was allowed to participate in China's lucrative real estate market, but I was never permitted to outright own the land. Why? Because that's simply the local laws inside that country. You might be thinking, well, that's not fair. If Americans can't buy land in China, Chinese shouldn't be allowed to buy land here either. But let's not forget that many countries around the world have strict land ownership laws. Thailand is one of the most popular spots in Asia for foreign property investment. Hundreds of thousands of foreigners have purchased properties throughout Thailand, but in every transaction, the local Thai government always has and always will own the land. The simple truth is that China is not an immigrant nation and has an entirely different system in place. It's an apples to oranges comparison. But the big takeaway from today's video is that Americans shouldn't worry about Chinese nationals buying US farmland. Immigration and foreign direct investment are the exact tools that made this nation great, and we should be welcoming foreign companies who want to invest inside this country and create more American jobs. Unfortunately, this is the world we live in 2023. The anti-China sentiment is increasing by the day, and your average citizen only reads the headlines and overreacts to what's really happening. But this is why we have this YouTube channel, to break down the myths, separate fact from fiction, and provide the nuance that you need to better understand the complex geopolitical issues that our world is facing every single day. Everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation on the US farmland, and I hope that you learned something today. Again, a huge thank you to AG1 for sponsoring today's important message. Make sure you take advantage of our special offer, secure your free gifts, and start taking the best nutritional drink I found to start my day and improve my health. Thank you all for your continued support, and I look forward to seeing you all in our next video soon.